If you work in public relations, then you know this problem already. 2/3 of the population of public relations globally is made up of women, but only 1/3 of the C-suite is women. That math isn't hard to do. That is a problem. There's something systemic that's in the way. My pals Amy Thurlow and Colleen Killingsworth in Canada have done some exceptional research looking at this problem. They've put it with links so you can check out the research for yourself. They've put all that research into this book. Their basic concept is we keep talking about adding women to a seat at the table, a seat at the table, a seat at the table, but without positive and effective process and systemic change, the table itself is wrong. So a seat at the table is like just a seat at the table. You get it? There's no voice here because the table is broken. They're both saying in this video, it's time to rethink the table. You've spent some serious time researching why women are underrepresented at the leadership level in PR, despite being the majority of the profession. Before we get into what needs to change, help me understand what's actually happening. What does the data show about where women are going?
You're right, Doug. We looked into a number of surveys and studies over the past several decades on this very issue, and just sort of to summarize overall, we would say that despite forming approximately 70% of the profession, women hold less than 30% of seats at the senior leadership, senior decision-making tables. And that's been fairly consistent across jurisdictions and over the years. So there's something there, right? That's really indicating barriers to women. And that's kind of where we started. That's where we dug into our research. You would think because there's this increased proportion of women in the profession that would lead to increased status and increased power or equality, but actually that hasn't happened, and it's labeled in some studies as a phenomenon that we know in public relations and in other sectors as the pink collar ghetto or the velvet ghetto, where women get access to a particular profession, but they can't seem to increase their status or accessibility to decision making in that profession. So it's all kinds of barriers that we talk about in the book are sort of factored into that. There's not one, single reason that I can point to and say this is why. What we do know is it's persistent and controlling for many other factors, tenure in the job, educational background, all those things. There's still this piece that we can't seem to get to.
It's just so frustrating.
And, our research really found that women are leaving traditional roles, leadership tracks, and organizations because the systems within organizations are making long-term sustainability for them just really difficult. Women face barriers that really include gender bias and stereotypes, old boys networks that make it really hard to break through, limited access to the dominant coalition, and again, some of that is because of those old boys networks, lack of mentorship and sponsorship, work-life imbalances and caregiving demands, imposter syndrome, and internalized self-doubt. And we know that's not just a women's issue. Many, career professionals, male or female, do suffer from that. And the intersectional barriers for women of color and our Indigenous women. That doesn't mean that they're quitting the profession. They're just finding different ways of being involved and trying to find that balance that is going to make them successful within the profession.
So the conversation has always been, how do we get more women to the table? But the title of the book is Rethinking the Table. I better say it formally. Rethinking the Table is what you search. You're essentially saying, let's change the table. What does that mean? Is it just adding more seats so it's a more crowded table?
Yeah. Nope, not at all. No. And I really feel that continuing that conversation about how do we get more women at the table is really the wrong conversation. It's how do we change the constructs and, transform what that table looks like and what the systems that support women leadership look like. It's a full-scale transformation, we believe, from, policies that support flexibility to ensuring, support and well-being for employees, especially women. And, that 24/7 nature of the PR industry, really, it's not just unsustainable. It disproportionately affects women because of the caregiving needs that they often have outside. So if we really want to make it more sustainable and inclusive, we really need to look at, how we change roles, how we change policies, how we change the systems within organizations, that may be suppressing women's desire to stay within the organization, stay within the leadership tracks, and actually, find their way to the table.
Like a lot of women at that senior level, and they're right at the point where they could escalate to the C-suite, but there's almost like I give up. Like this is ridiculous. I got people at home pulling me this way, and I need to do it, or I've got things at work that are exasperating, and a lot of them they go hang a shingle. Not that hang a shingle if that's in your blood, but we're talking about how to explore the leadership. So it's systemic change. What has to happen? Because I'm one of those old people who says we've been talking about systemic change since the 90s. What actually has to happen? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. And really, I mean, that is the question, right? In terms of how do you rethink this table? And so I guess I'll just start at the individual level. What do women do in public relations careers? And it's important for women to advocate for themselves, not just asking for access or demanding access at the table, but asking for changes to the things Colleen was just describing in terms of the structure and system that they work in. Women need to negotiate opportunities for flexibility so that their life and their work, I don't know if the word balance is even, people aren't even talking about balance, just sustainable or something.
Yeah,
exactly, yeah. They should seek out mentors and champions and networks, peer groups that support them and support their work to make these changes, and to make strategic career choices, keeping in mind, what they need in the big picture in terms of success. But the individual struggle for equity is not enough. It really has to happen at a broader systemic level, as you're saying, and we have to transform systems at a very profound level. So, like transforming organizational structures. It sounds like kind of like I'm saying this is very straightforward, and of course it's not. It's very complicated, but I mean, if you work in corporate public relations, you're in an entrenched corporate system, and there's certain discourses of success there that are very hard to unwind. So, what does a successful senior leader look like? Excuse me. What does it look like when you're at the table? And we will think of things like, available 24/7, working all the time. At that, available for any crisis, committed to the organization beyond any. Those things, if we use those as the way we define success or use them as determinants of success, there was one quote that came up in our research that says it makes it feel like public relations almost unsustainable, incompatible with family life. Like you just can't be 24/7 on crisis communication and also do what you need to do in other aspects of your life. So it's just not sustainable to have an industry that operates in that way and expect the employees and the people in it, the people that make the work happen, be able to sustain that. And then sort of at policy levels, there's things like we have pay equity legislation in Canada. Many countries do. It has
Different
to
provinces, I mean, the enact it differently across the country, but
Yes, provinces have it, different sectors have it.
right.
But across, not just in public relations, but in Canada, across sectors, there exists still a wage equity gap. Still, again, controlling for all factors, there's still a piece we can't explain except gender, as the difference. We need to enforce pay equity, and we need to adopt intersectional approaches to diversity. So considering more than just gender, but gender and other factors that define the identities of the individuals in our profession.
Yeah. If I could just build on a couple of things that Amy said quickly. One of our interview subjects, I just loved kind of the framework that she shared. In her success, she's always looked for organizations that really align with her values and goals. And, so she's not trying to go into organizations that may not align with a bit of the work-life flexibility she needs, as a single mom, but finding those organizations that do align with that. So that is, something I think women can take away and think about, and just having the courage to have the tough conversations about, I'm happy to be on 24/7 every other week when I don't have my kids. But what it looks like those weeks I have my kids is I'm leaving at 4, I'm taking care of my family, I'll log back on and finish my day. So to find the organizations where you can have those conversations, where you can find that win-win balance, I think was something that really stuck with me and from some of our interviews.
Well, and not to skip the part that okay, more men can help out more at home. I don't mean to just gloss over that. That's I don't mean to treat it as a whole other discussion or an assumed. Each of us is only one person. So let me split this into two parts. For the woman listening right now or finds herself in this conversation, that she's having an identity moment right now. This applies to me.
Yeah.
What are the practical steps she can take? But let me add to that a second question, because I think the role that men play here is equally as critical at this juncture in the conversation or design of the table. Equally. Mm-hmm. What can men do to help this, which is better for everyone?
Yeah, I think ultimately, for kind of a takeaway for women, is that really understanding kind of your values, what you want out of your career, what you want to contribute. What does the whole package look like? And then find the construct that allows you to be successful. And I think for men, we know, and Amy and I have talked about this a lot, and in the many venues we've discussed the book. This isn't just a women's conversation. This is an all of us conversation.
It's a PR. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Yeah. And I also, it's a generational conversation as well. Because, as different generations, we have different experiences in how we kind of frame that work-life balance and the expectations of caregiving and such. And I do think I hold a lot of hope for the younger up-and-coming generations that they're a little bit more inclusive, I think, in how they view their roles in balancing, work, home, caregiving, and such than some of the older generations. So I just really think it is an all of us conversation, and especially when you're looking at trying to break down some of those systemic issues that really impact women and diversity beyond gender. It's how do we kind of break it and then reconstruct it to support a better PR industry going forward. I don't know, Amy, did you? I'm sure you've
No,
got thoughts on that.
I absolutely agree. I mean, and I'm so glad you made that point because a lot of times people we talk to think, this is a women's issue in public relations, but it's not. Our starting point is that the profession as is not sustainable. So I mean that's something all practitioners should take note of and think about. Okay, how can we tackle this? We heard a lot from people about golf. I'm just using this as an example of a structural issue, but women in public relations will say, well, in my corporate environment or whatever, a lot of decisions get made on the golf course, and men play golf. And so they were excluded from those conversations. And I like to use that example. I mean, I don't like the example, but I like to use it because it kind of highlights, so what's the solution? And a lot of people say, well, let's teach women to play golf, right? Because then they'd be on the golf course. And that's, to us, kind of similar to saying, let's put more chairs at the table, or let's get people in. It doesn't solve the problem because there were lots of structural issues around how those decisions were made outside of the office in different networks, who was allowed to play, who didn't have access, all that thing, that are not solved by just, moving the chairs or changing the players on the team or whatever. So you really have to look deeper in terms of how can we work together? What is it that we want our profession to look like? I mean, is it sustainable the way it is when success looks like something where you have to sacrifice other parts of your life? And then what needs to happen to change that?
Well, how important is mentorship for the woman let's say in her 20s, to be able to find a mentor, someone in their 40s or 50s?
I think mentorship is the key, and it's not structured mentorship. To me, it's really about finding and building those relationships. And you could have multiple mentors, throughout your career. You can figure out, a skill set you want to build. Maybe you want to build more around finance. So finding a mentor, in that finance sphere that can really help you understand budgeting and financials, but it's about building the relationships, and it's about showing up. And I really believe that mentorship is a two-way street. I look at my mentees, and I'm constantly learning something from them.
So-called reverse mentorship, right?
It is, and to be open to that. And when you look at mentorship as something that's more organic than structured, then you're more open to build those relationships, to understand somebody's skill sets and their aspirations, and to really then become more of a champion for them and helping them, grow their career. So almost even like a career coach sometimes. So it's just looking at the construct, I think, a bit differently. But it is critical, no matter where you're at in your career, whether you're a senior practitioner or a junior practitioner. Mentorship, I think, is vital.
Well said. Colleen, Amy, really appreciate your time today. Come back. I want to bring you both back in a couple of weeks, do another episode on a key part of the book.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Pleasure to be here.